Good morning, everyone. Good to be with you. And I thank God that for this opportunity to be with you and share some scripture. And I hope we all find it enlightening and worthy of further study, because it is a bit of an unusual subject. And as you can see on my screen here, the PowerPoint screen, the main question is, who was Cain's father? Now, that should be a simple question to answer. But first, I want to back up a little bit, and I want to go back to, were Adam and Eve the first and only humans? So as I was saying, this morning, I'm really going to go out on a limb and present something so unusual that you may never have heard it suggested before. But I want to assure you that I would never suggest anything that didn't have considerable scriptural support behind it. And I want you to know that this doctrine has been around for thousands of years, maybe many thousands of years. But it is way outside of the current mainstream Christianity. So in the end, I'll have to leave it up to you in its evaluation and whether you think it is worthy or not. But before I even get started, I have to lay down a foundational prerequisite to that question. And that is, were Adam and Eve the first two humans? And I believe that they were not. As you might remember, both Tim Haley and I happened to give a message at the last live conference here in Brockport in September of 2019, that there is plenty of evidence that Adam and Eve were not the first humans. Proof texts that they were the first couple are not as plain as you might think. There is much to consider, and I think we should be open to the possibility that they were not. In my message at that conference, I made 24 points that question how it was possible for Adam and Eve to be the only people on earth at their creation. Let me recap just some of those points. Number one, it is impossible to tell from the grammar of Genesis 1 if God made only one couple or thousands of men and women. You can assume that there was only one couple, but that's what it is, an assumption. If we take a look at Genesis 1:27 in the Concordant Literal Version, it says, and creating is the Elohim humanity in his image. In the image of Elohim, he creates it. Male and female, he creates them. From this verse only, no one can tell if God made only one couple. Do you also assume that God made only one pair of every kind of fish, bird, and animal in the world? Probably not. So why would we make that assumption for the humans? From the first chapter alone, there is no reason to believe that God did not make many more humans. Genesis 2. There are two human creation accounts. In chapter 1, we are told humans were created on day 6. But we are not told specifically how many were created. In chapter 2, we are told two humans were created, Adam and Eve, but not specifically when they were created. Unfortunately, there is no verse found to confirm that these two stories are or are not different versions of the same event. To believe that they are the same event is simply an assumption. Number 3, if Adam and Eve were created on the same day, a lot of things had to happen very quickly. Can you imagine suddenly coming into existence like Adam? That's probably not something you've ever thought about, but I have thought about that, and it would be a very strange situation. Adam named all the different kinds of animals and birds. How long would it take for Adam to realize that there was no animal suitable for him and to genuinely become lonely. Now, I like to say this, I went into a lot of detail at the conference, but this is just giving you the high points. But there's a lot to consider there. For instance, when Adam named animals, he named them for a reason. And the only way you could name them for a reason is because you had some kind of experience with all those animals. And having that experience takes a lot of time. Oh, let me say. Can you imagine suddenly coming into existence like Adam? Can you imagine your absolute bewilderment? You have absolutely no experience at or of anything. You're just like a newborn baby. You are totally ignorant of everything. You don't even know who you are or where you came from, where you are, where you can go, what you can physically do, and what you can't. You know, can you fly like the birds? You'd have to jump off a cliff and find out. At your first breath, you know nothing about God or time, the world, how your own body works, or even how to feed yourself or what to feed yourself. Everything must be learned from scratch. That would take a tremendous amount of time. Genesis tells us that Adam named all the different kinds of animals and birds. How could he properly name them unless he had experience with them? How long would it take for Adam to realize that there was no animal suitable for him and to genuinely become lonely while he was overwhelmed learning about the whole world? How many hours, months, or even years might that take? But if Eve was created on the same day, let's say less than 12 hours after Adam, then one has to explain how to fit all of this into those few hours in the afternoon of day 6. Now, continuing very briefly, here are a few of my other points I brought up that day. The Bible tells us that Seth was the next son of Adam and Eve and the replacement for Abel. But he was not born until Adam was 130 years old. That makes Adam and Cain the only men in the world, and a lot of other verses difficult to understand because of that. For instance, who was Cain afraid of that was going to kill him? We find that in Genesis 4:14. Number 5, if there was no other men for 130 years, why did God put a mark on Cain immediately after the murder to identify him and protect him from being killed? You find that in Genesis 4:15. Number 6, in Genesis 4:17, Cain marries, and we have the age-old question, where did his wife come from? This is especially difficult if Adam and Eve were no longer living together. And I'll get to that in a moment. Number 7, in the second half of Genesis 4:17, we learn that Cain has a son. He then builds a city and names it after his son. But why do 3 people need to have a city built for them to live in? Why was Seth specifically said in the Bible to be born in the image and likeness of Adam? What other man's likeness and image could Seth possibly look like? Unless there were other men around who were not Adam and perhaps did not even look like Adam. Number 9. In the Old Testament, trees are symbolically used to represent people. And this is especially made plain in Ezekiel 31. I contend that the tree of knowledge of good and evil did not represent an evil act, but evil people. Number 10. In the Old Testament, eating and fruit are sometimes symbolic of sexual activity. See Proverbs and the Song of Solomon. It can easily be understood that the act of taking the fruit of the tree is a biblical euphemism for sexual activity outside of their marriage. This fracture in their relationship may explain why Adam and Eve did not bear their next son Seth for another 135 years. Now, that is the end of my recap of that message. So now I have at least got you thinking of the possibility that there were other men and women in the world before Adam and Eve. And so I can proceed with my new topic, and that is Adam was not the father of Cain. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil represents an evil branch of humanity that came into existence even before Adam and Eve. Exactly how they became evil probably has to do with the fallen angels. This is not clearly stated, but this general idea is a common Christian belief. For instance, in Genesis 6, verses 2 to 4, we are informed that the sons of Elohim took the daughters of men for wives, and they bore Nephilim, or giants, or mighty men of old, or men of renown, as different versions interpret those words from that passage. So the idea that human women can be impregnated by men who are not the descendants of Adam is not an uncommon belief. It may be strange, but it's out there, and it is accepted. But I'm going to apply this circumstance that we see in Genesis 6 and bring it back to chapter 2 and the story of Adam and Eve's fall. Chapter 2 or 3, whatever that is there. So, as I said, the tree represents people, and eating the fruit of that tree represents Adam and Eve having sex with those people. And the first fruit of that relationship was Cain. And as an aside, this helps explain why Adam and Eve covered their genitals. Their sin defied the command of God, but it had to do with sex. It had nothing to do with eating food or any other act of disobedience towards God. So now let me start. First, I will give the only verse in the Bible that seems to claim that Adam is the father of Cain. Genesis 4:1. Genesis 4:1 claims Adam is the father of Cain, but that verse is very suspicious. Note that there is no other verse to act as a second witness and confirm that this verse is uncorrupted. I certainly do hold most every verse in the Bible with great authenticity, but we will learn that this verse has always been seen as very problematic. Genesis 4:1 in the Concordant Version reads, "And the human knows Eve, his wife, and pregnant is she, and is bearing Cain. And she is saying, I acquire a man, Yahweh." Notice that the Concordant Version very carefully does not translate Adam as a personal name, but correctly translates it as the human. The Hebrew word Adam can mean either a human or be a proper name. If the word the is in front of Adam, then it means human. If the is not in front, then it is a proper name. For example, Bill refers to a person, but the bill refers to an invoice or paper money. In this case, the definite article the is present, so we know that a human had sex with Eve, but his personal name is not stated. This verse has given Bible translators fits. The literal Hebrew is actually, I have acquired a man with Yahweh. But because that's so incomplete and nonsensical, taken word by word, most translations feel they have to add words to it to make it give some sort of sense. For instance, the ASV says, and the man knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man with the help of Jehovah. The King James is similar, or so. It says, and Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. The Brenton, which is a translation of the Greek Septuagint, says, and Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and brought forth Cain, and said, I have gained a man through God. And again, you can see here in these two verses, the ASV does translate the Hebrew word Adam as man, whereas the King James uses the personal name Adam. So there is debate as to whether, it should be translated man or Adam, but according to proper grammar that I am informed of, it should be just man or human, because the definite article is not in front, or because the definite article is in front. Otherwise, it would be a personal name. Now, I don't know why the concordant version has left out a word in the phrase. But the phrase is literally, as I said, I acquire a man with Yahweh. As such, it does not make any normal grammatical sense. It has to be interpreted, and even the interpretation has to be more fully explained. So most Bibles translate it something like, I have gotten a man through or with the help of the Lord. But those words, the help of, are made up and inserted into the text by the translators. They are an assumption of what the translators think the author meant to say, but didn't write it. But why would the original authors not write it? They have no idea, the translators, but they have tried to make some sense out of an incomplete sentence. But even with the assumed added words, the verse still doesn't make much sense. We still have to guess why Eve said the baby she bore by having sex with the human required the help of God. Why was God's help needed? One can make lots of assumptions, like because God is the giver of all life, but that is not much help in explaining this confused verse. I remember Dean Huff of the Concordant Publishing Organization trying to explain this to our class in Kitchener years ago. He said maybe Eve thought that this baby was Yahweh. Perhaps she thought he was the promised seed of Genesis 3:13. That's interesting, but again, it's an assumption. And even if it was true, it was certainly a very wrong assumption by Eve. Regarding this verse, the Interpreter's Bible, which is a 12-volume set designed for educated laymen or the clergy, states this. Oh, wait a second. I'm ahead of myself there. All right. Okay, so like I was saying, the Interpreter's Bible tries to understand it this way, or they make a comment on it. From the Lord, as the King James renders it, they render it that way, but it is literally with Yahweh, and so it is unintelligible, and it became under circumstances which are obscure. They don't know how it got to be that way. Verse 1b, the end of that verse, can scarcely be translated, still less understood. That's a quote from the Interpreter's Bible. So this is the problem. Believing that Adam is the father of Cain rests solely on this verse. But the second half of this verse can scarcely be translated, still less understood. A second witness confirming that Adam is the father of Cain would go a long way to bolster this verse, its validity, but it does not exist as far as I am aware. Now, getting to the second part of my message, in contrast, the following verses indicate that Adam was not the father of Cain. Now, in order to save time, I will start off with my summary, and that is probably as far as I will get. At maybe some other time, I can get into the details, but my feeling is that there was going to be way too much to get. I've got about 20 or 30 points here, and I can't go into detail on all of them, although it would be a good study. And you may want further backing of what I'm about to say. But I'll go over the highlights first of all, and then we'll take it from there. At Genesis 5:1-32 lists all the firstborn male descendants in the lineage of Adam. Neither Cain nor any of his descendants are included in that list. So obviously, I could go to that cite that chapter 5. It's the whole chapter is nothing but a list of names of the descendants of Adam, all the way from Adam probably to Noah, maybe even on to Abraham, I'm not sure. But anyway, if you study that list, it's not hard to just to study it. All you have to do is read it. And Cain nor any of his descendants are not in there. So why is that? That's a big red flag to me. Number 2, at Genesis 4:25, Seth is said to be a replacement for Abel. But if Cain is the firstborn and is still alive, there's no need for a replacement for Abel. Certainly, it was good for Adam and Eve to have more sons, but they would be in addition to Abel, not as a replacement for Abel. And I say that because in some special way, Seth was a replacement for Abel. We will see next how he is special. At Jude 1:14, we are told that Enoch was the seventh from Adam. We will see that Enoch was the seventh in line from Adam only if we include Abel in that line. That was the line of firstborn sons that found its fulfillment in Jesus Christ. Cain is not part of that line, meaning Cain is not Adam's firstborn son. And again, if we took the time, I would show you that list of 6 people, and it doesn't make sense unless you include Abel in that list. And that is the only list that shows the descendants of Adam leading up to Jesus Christ. 4. In 2 Peter 2:5 tells us that Noah was the 8th preacher of righteousness. Once again, this is the same line of firstborn sons as the line Enoch just mentioned. And again, it leads us back to Adam through Seth, not Cain. Cain is not stated to be in any line of Adam's sons. 5. At Genesis 4:3-5, we read that Abel's sacrifice was accepted and Cain's was not. Much has been speculated as to why, but we will be reminded that a sacrifice may only be offered by a legitimate priest. Each family can have only one priest, and so only one of these men can be the legitimate firstborn son and therefore family priest. So it would appear that Abel's was accepted because he was the firstborn, and at that point, only son of Adam. And again, if I had time to go into much more detail, I could show that this has to do with the priesthood of Melchizedek before the Levites became priests and replaced the firstborn son of each family. And we know that God only accepted sacrifices from a legitimate priest, because if a non-legitimate priest offered a sacrifice, or even in the wrong way, he was liable to death. 6. At 1 John 3:12, we are told that Cain is the wicked one, that Cain is of the wicked one. The Hebrew grammar clearly means son of the wicked one. So if you believe Cain is Adam's son, it follows that you believe Adam is the wicked one, or you do not believe the verse is true, or you must spiritualize its meaning somehow. 7. At Luke 11:47-51, Christ told the Pharisees their fathers killed the prophets, and they endorsed the acts of their fathers, even though they built tombs to memorialize them. Jesus continued to say, they shed the blood of all the prophets from the beginning of the world, right from Abel to Zechariah. Again, if I had time, I would read that quote exactly as written, but that's what it says. So if their father killed Abel, how much plainer can Jesus make it that they are the descendants of Cain? And as unusual as that sounds, taking it literally, that's what it says. So that's what it means. 8. They are descendants of Cain, while Jesus is a descendant of Seth. Luke 3:23-38 lists the continuous line of Jesus right from his legal human father Joseph all the way back to Seth and Adam and God. Cain, again, is always excluded from the lineage of Adam simply because Adam was not his father. 9. At John 8:44, Jesus says to the Pharisees, you are of your father, the adversary, and the desires of your father you are wanting to do. And who is that father? The verse continues with, he was a man killer from the beginning. The first recorded murder in the Bible is that of Cain, murdering his half-brother Abel. Cain, admittedly, was a half-brother, but not through Adam, but through Eve. We have always spiritualized these verses, but we should consider believing them just as Jesus literally spoke them. At Genesis 5:3, we read that Seth was in the likeness and image of Adam. This sounds innocent enough, but if Adam was the only man on earth, then who else's image and likeness could Seth possibly have been in? Instead, I believe this is referring to an unstated contrast to Cain, who was not in the likeness and image of Adam. Why else would this detail be included? 11. Eve named both Cain and Abel. Cain means acquired, but Seth means set, the very word God had used when he said at Genesis 3:15, "And enmity I am setting between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed." Thus she exalted, "Truly Elohim has set for me another seed instead of Abel," or in replacement of Abel. What is being stated here is that there are two seed lines. Seth, being the replacement for Abel, is one of those seed lines, and the other is the seed line of the serpent. 12. Okay. Now, that finishes my summary. I'm sure I will not get enough time to get through all the details of that summary, but I was going to say I would, but I'll make a start. But first, let me say that I'm not pretending that I have all this figured out or have all the answers to every question, because if you do accept this, there are a lot of implications that come with it, and they might be very difficult to resolve. But nevertheless, at least for me, there's too much evidence to simply ignore the subject. I believe it invites further study and scrutiny. Next, I want to read from some Aramaic Targums. I assure you that I do not believe the Targums are as trustworthy as our Bible. But sources outside of our Bible can be very helpful in understanding difficult passages of the Bible. It is not unusual for Bible students to consult outside sources. Josephus, for instance, gives us much insight into the Bible and Bible history that we would not have otherwise have had. Once again, I will state that we must be very skeptical of outside material, but it can be very enlightening to us as to why and what ancient Jews were writing about thousands of years ago. First of all, what is a Targum? Wikipedia says a Targum was an originally spoken translation of the Hebrew Bible that a professional translator would give in the common language of the listeners when that common language was not Hebrew. This had become necessary near the end of the 1st century BC. And why that is, of course, is because the Jews were scattered several times in the Old Testament, and they lived outside of Judea and Israel, in Babylon, for instance, and Assyria, and they lost their language for the most part, and their everyday language was not Hebrew, and so they lost the ability to read their own Hebrew scriptures, so it had to be translated, and that's what a Targum is. It's a translation into Aramaic or some other language, so that the common people could understand what the Hebrew Bible said. So, because it's a translation and because there's commentary within that translation, it is not canon as we Christians accept canon. but it can be worthwhile looking at, as I'm saying. So these Targums had become necessary near the end of the 1st century BC, as the common language was Aramaic, and Hebrew was used for little more than schooling and worship. The translator frequently expanded his translation with paraphrases, explanations, and examples. So it became a kind of sermon. And like I'm saying, we should always be wary of sermons, this one included. Wikipedia says that the Targum Pseudo-Jonathan is an interpretation of the Pentateuch, but it's from the land of Israel. So these were Jews that assembled this Targum. And of course, because it's a translation of their own scriptures. This Targum is more than a mere translation. It includes material collected from various sources, as well as earlier material from the Talmud. And of course, we should be very suspicious of the Talmud. Most of it is heresy, but even within the Talmud, there is much worthy of reading. and like anything, it's a mixture of good and evil, and that's the best way to convince someone of a lie, is mix it in with the truth. So we have to try and, when we read these things, we have to weed out the bad and keep the good. So, like I say, it is a combination of a commentary and a translation. So, with that warning in mind, nevertheless, let's read what it had to say. Yep. Okay. What it had to say on Genesis 3:6. It reads, "And seeing is the woman that the tree is good for food, and that it brings a yearning to the eyes, and is to be coveted as the tree to make one intelligent. And taking is she of its fruit and eating, and she is giving moreover to her husband with her, and they are eating." Now, there's not much there to complain about or to be suspicious of, but that's just one Targum. Now, this Targum is unique inasmuch as that it identifies the angel Samael as the serpent. And this Targum translates this verse as following. "And the woman saw Samael, the angel of death, and she was afraid and knew that the tree was good for food, and that it was a remedy for the enlightenment of the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise. So she took of its fruit and ate, and also gave it to her husband, and he ate." Once again, there's not too much extra there, except that this angel of death is named. And his name is Samael, and I'm not sure what that exactly, well, maybe that translates to angel of death. We know that the suffix on the end, El, is short for Elohim, meaning it refers to a god of some sort. Okay, and again, it continues with this verse. "And Adam knew that his wife Eve had conceived from Samael, the angel of death, and she became pregnant and bore Cain. And he was like those on high, and not like those below. And she said, I have got a man from the angel of the Lord." So again, now we're adding more information, but it does add some sense to what we have been trying to make sense out of. I have got a man from the angel, not from the Lord, but it should be from the angel of the Lord. And that angel is named Samael. Now, that brings to mind John 8:23. In the concordant version has it as, he said to them, you are of that which is below, and I am of that which is above. You are of this world, I am not of this world. And that is Jesus, of course, saying those words to the Pharisees. You are of that which is below, and I am of that which is above. You are of this world, I am not of this world. And also Luke 10:18, and he said to them, I beheld Satan as lightning falling out of heaven. Now, this rendition of Genesis 4:1 is interesting. Well, I'm backing up here a little bit. For it speaks of the angel of death, plus like those on high and like those below, which I said reminds us of these verses. Now, another Targum, that was Pseudo-Jonathan, this one is called the Palestinian Targum, reads like this. And Adam knew his wife Eve, who had desired the angel, and she conceived and bare Cain. And she said, I have acquired a man, the angel of the Lord. Now, another rabbinic work called Pirke de Rabbi Eliezer reads like this. And she saw that his likeness was not of earthly beings, but of the heavenly beings. And she prophesied and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. Now, it would appear from those references, the problem with Genesis 4:1 is an omission of some words of the Hebrew text. So now let me quote Genesis 4:1 from the King James Version, but then add the potentially needed words found in square brackets from the Targum of Jonathan, so it will finally make some sense. And it would go like this then. The King James plus the Targum. And Adam knew his wife Eve, who was pregnant by Samael, and she conceived and bare Cain. And he was like the heavenly beings and not like earthly beings. And she said, I have gotten a man from the angel of the Lord. So now this is where I will leave off for now because I'm run out of time. But I pray that this presentation was accurate and scriptural and invites further study. Like I say, much more could be given to back up all this, but if I do that, that will have to wait for another time. So I hope that that was entertaining and yet scriptural. And I don't mean entertaining in the sense of delighting the senses, but inviting further scriptural study and something to consider. And much, much, much more could be said about this because it makes sense with a lot of other things that Jesus said, like I say, regarding that, the Pharisees were of the wicked one, and they just seem to be another type of people altogether. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. Amen.